everyone, it's Laura from Crafty Not Shifty, and today I'm going to be sharing with you 10 cards made using the Love From Lizi February card kit. So let's jump right in. Quite a lot of people have picked up on the challenge that was sort of jokingly set by Lizi, I think sort of accidentally without really meaning to set a challenge. She mentioned in her February kit unboxing video that it would be really nice to make an 8x8 card with this particular sheet of paper. So I turned 30 this year. I've got a lot of friends that also turned 30, so 30th birthday cards are big for me this year. So I decided to use this piece for a card for my friend. So I used an oval die as a template and I cut out a section of the cardstock. I could have run it through my die cut machine, but because I was keeping it as 8x8, it wouldn't fit through my big shot. So there we go, I had to trace the die and then cut it out using a craft knife. And I went ahead and embossed on some heat resistant acetate using some lilac embossing powder, which unfortunately did turn sort of clear as I was working through, so you can't really see it too much, and I ended up having to touch that up with a Sharpie. But I embossed Happy 30th Birthday, and I then used some of the peel-offs to go around the edge of that oval where the cut line sort of hits that acetate, just to neaten that up. So I went ahead and used a whole bunch of the sequins that were included in the kit, and I also added a couple more sort of pinks and purples that I had in my stash. So this is the section of the oval that I cut out, and I went ahead and added some glue to the back of that and just dropped that inside. And I've got some pieces of extra white cardstock here that I've taken from my stash, and I've made an 8x8 card base, and I'm just sticking the front panel onto that card base. Okay, so I've got a really nice shaker. As I say, it's unfortunate that you couldn't quite see the happy birthday, so I just traced over that using a purple Sharpie, and that is card 1 all finished. So moving on to card 2, for this card I decided that I'd go ahead and attempt to make sort of a cross-stitch type pattern. I'm not entirely sure it worked, but I wanted this to be a Harry Potter themed card, so it should read in the background Alohomora, which is the spell for opening locks, and I just thought that was perfect for the key dies. So I went ahead and cut one of the wood chip butterflies in half, and I sprayed that with some distress spray in the silver colour, and I'm going to use that to create sort of like wings for the keys. So I used one of the 2 key dies, and I actually cut it the right way round and then I cut it upside down, so that's how I end up with the mirror image of that key, just in case you were wondering. And then I attach half of each of those butterfly wings to create the wings for the keys. So I think that looks really cute as it is, but I then decided, excuse my head trying to get into the way there, that I would add a gold, it's supposed to be a lightning bolt. I'm not entirely sure if it works as a lightning bolt, but there we go. I added that in gold, and then I went round the edge of the card with some stitching detail also in gold. And if I didn't mention, the wording was applied with a silver pen. So once I had that done, I used my ATG tape gun to attach that to my card base, and apart from that first card, all of the rest of my card bases are made using the cardstock that was included in the kit. So I went round everything with a black pen just to make it stand out a little bit more against the background, and then I used one of the suggested add-on items, which is the Nuvo drops in the silver colour, and I added that to the wings. So overall, it might not be the best card, but I'm quite excited that I gave it a try, and I do have quite a soft spot for that card. So for card 3, I've used a nested heart die to go ahead and trace my heart. You could just freehand this, but I wanted it to be kind of perfect, so I'm going ahead and sticking some ribbon. This is all of the different ribbons that are included in the kit, apart from, you can just see that sheer organza ribbon, and I will use that on another card, so you will see that in use later on. So I ran that through my die cut machine, and because it was so thick with the cardstock and also the extra ribbon, I did have to go ahead and just trim that using my craft knife. So I've got my card base and some brown ink, and I'm just inking up a background stamp. I've got it off slightly to one side, and I'm just using my MISTI to make sure I get perfect placement on that background stamp, and then I'm going to die cut out of the front of the card only, the same heart. So this is the exact same size heart that I used for my panel, my ribbon covered heart that I made earlier, so they'll fit into each other really nicely, and I'm just using some of the purple glittery cardstock from the kit for an edging strip over on the left. So I'm using my Tombow Mono glue. I use a few different types of glue throughout this process. I don't know, sometimes I just grab what's closest, sometimes there's a particular reason why I use a certain glue, but yeah, you'll see me use a few different types. So I went around that heart, which is stuck on the inside of the card, to give it a white stitching line, and I then decided to do the same on the outside just to help that stand out a little bit against the background. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the thank you stamp included in the kit to heat emboss on the front of the card. So I used my anti-static powder tool, which just helps to make sure that the embossing powder only sticks to where your sticky Versamark ink is. I've stamped that down and then used some white embossing powder, and I just used a brush. I didn't catch it on the camera, but I just used a brush to brush off any of that powder that had stuck where I didn't want it, and used my heat gun to melt the powder. So I like how this card's just a little bit different with that peekaboo sort of window in the front panel there. Okay, so moving on to card 4, I decided that I was going to use 3 pieces of the different patterned paper, and this butterfly paper here, I wanted to colour the background so it matched a little bit better, and I'm just using some of my distress ink to do that. This particular paper has got a spot, I think it's called like a spot UV gloss, so each of those butterflies has got almost like an emboss resist effect, so if you apply ink over the top and then brush it with a dry paper towel, then any of the ink that's sitting on top of there will come right off. So now my paper colours match just a little bit more closely. I mean, they coordinated perfectly as they were, but I decided I wanted this one to be just a little bit more pink, and it was a nice chance to be able to show you the technique that you can do with those papers. So I'm using some temporary adhesive here to glue or temporarily glue these pieces down so I can go ahead and cut a square window out of them. So I just wanted to make sure they stayed in place as I ran this through my die cut machine. And then I'll pop that piece out and I'll be able to use those pieces to stick them down onto my card. So I've just placed them down. They're not actually stuck at the moment, I've just stuck them down using that same temporary adhesive, and I'm stamping this bird which came in the kit. I really love this stamp. I've seen quite a few people use this on the Love From Lizi Facebook page, and it is really beautiful. So yeah, I went ahead and coloured it with my Prismacolor pencils, and I didn't catch all of that on camera because it's a lot to get through, 10 cards, and I figured you don't want to sit watching me colour for sort of 10-15 minutes. So I then used the same distress ink to colour a white piece of cardstock so I could have a matching sentiment strip, and I trimmed that out and used my corner chomper to go ahead and round the corners. Any of the supplies that you can see me using that weren't included in the kit, such as the corner chomper or my ATG tape gun, I'll try to make sure I include links to those in the description below or over at my blog, which is craftynotshifty.wordpress.com. So now I'm peeling each of these pieces of paper up and I'm applying some tape with my ATG gun, and this will just make sure that they're stuck down permanently rather than that temporary adhesive that I was using just to help me with the placement of my stamp. And then once I've got all of those stuck down, you could be finished here, but I decided to add a little bit of something extra by coming in with the peel-offs and adding a frame around that square, and then using foam tape to mount my sentiment. Once that was finished, I brought in some of the enamel dots, and I just used my craft knife to help me pick those up and place them down. That's how I prefer to work with enamel dots. I think it's easier to just sort of slide your craft knife underneath them and pick them up with the adhesive. They are all self-adhesive, and stick some of those down around the sentiment. And then for a little something extra, I just added some of the Nuvo drops to the centre of each of those flowers, and I really like the way that gives a little 3D effect on those flowers. Okay, so for card 5, I decided to do some ink blending. I've taped a section of my card panel off, and I'm just using a clarity stencil brush to add some of the purple pigment ink that's included in the kit. And I'm just sort of spreading that around a little bit darker in the bottom corner, and then fading out slightly lighter towards the top right-hand corner. And once I'm happy with the amount of ink, I just peeled off that stencil. Okay, so off camera I cut out a whole bunch of the butterflies. This is from the same paper that I talked about earlier, has the spot gloss. And I cut out a whole bunch of these and I laid them out in a design that I liked, and I used some tape to hold those together so I could pick it up in one piece and apply some adhesive and then just lay that down on top of my card. So I think I've seen similar techniques on other people's videos where they've used a product called Press and Seal. It's not as readily available in the UK, so I just went ahead and used some of my post-it tape to hold everything together. And I'm using again that thank you stamp, only this time with the purple pigment ink, to stamp my sentiment in the bottom right hand corner. I really like this card. It's quite a simple card, quite quick and easy to make if you exclude all the time fussy cutting, but I think it's really worth it for the end result. Okay, so cards 6 and 7 are essentially the same design, but I thought I'd show you both of them. I really like how each of them turned out. So I used, again, that butterfly paper. I think it's one of my favourites. I had a hard time cutting into some of these pieces of paper because they were so beautiful, but the butterfly one, once I'd started cutting into it, I sort of couldn't stop. So I cut a strip and stuck that down on the left-hand side, leaving a small gap, and then used 2 thin pieces of the silver mirror board, and I'm just masking off part of the thank you sentiment. So when I ink it up, I can ink up just the thank and then just the U, so I can change the placement of that stamp slightly. Okay, so now I'm going ahead and adding some more of those sequins. So you'll notice this time, instead of using glue dots or any other kind of adhesive, I'm actually using the Nuvo drops. I used a little bit too much there and I had to wipe it away, but I'm just putting a small dot and then pressing the sequins into the dot. So the hole inside the sequins, the Nuvo will actually sort of ooze through, and you can just sort of see that there when I hold the card to the side. So as it dries, it will work as an adhesive and it will stick those down, and you'll also get that fun little dot of the Nuvo in the centre. So you can see for the other card I followed almost exactly the same design. I just used that peacock paper and I used a black ink for the thank you sentiment. Okay, so card 8 and 9 are another pair. I'm using the wood chip veneers. I'm using the rose here, and I'm just going ahead and colouring that in with my Copics in super quick speed. I don't colour that quickly. And I've gone ahead and run my card base through my Sizzix machine using an embossing folder. So I have a strip of cardstock here and I'm using a paper punch. I believe this is by Martha Stewart, and it's one of those edge punches where you punch it once and then you line up the pattern with the design that's printed either side, so you can get a nice straight cut all the way along the edge of a piece of paper. Once I've done that, I'm taking some more of my ribbon and I'm just applying a little bit of adhesive and using the squares on my grid mat to help me line up with exactly where I want that to be so it's nice and straight. So once I've got that in place, I tied a bow. I wasn't going to make you watch me tie a bow because it took me a while. Yeah, I'm not the best when it comes to tying bows, so if anyone's got any hints or tips, do let me know. And I'm using a glue dot to go ahead and stick my bow down onto the front of that card. I'm using a couple of extra glue dots to make sure that the tails stay in place, and that'll just help the bow stay exactly where I want it. I've got my trusty ATG dispenser again, and then I'm going to apply this down to the card panel. Now peel off my coloured wood chip rose and place that down just there, and then to finish it off I'm using some black ink and I've got the Enjoy stamp in my Misty. So because of the texture that's on this paper now due to the embossing, then I found it was easiest to use my Misty. I did get a little bit of ink where I didn't want it, but I just used the Tombow Mono sand eraser to rub that away and nobody will ever know. So to finish off the card, I added 3 of the enamel dots. I added, I think that was the medium size, and then 1 of the small dots either side. And I just think that looks really cute. So I did the same thing for my next card, only I used a pattern paper with a bird, and I used the bird sat on top of a rose. And this time I used a slightly different ribbon and a different shade of the enamel dots. Okay, so card 10, I do actually have a bonus card as well, so if you're still with me, stick right through to the end. I'm going ahead and adding some of my tape to the front of my card panel, and I have that beautiful stag paper that I'm applying to the top section of the card, and then this green sort of damask effect paper to the bottom. So I'm going to want to go ahead and cover up the section where those two join, but before I do that I added one of the peel-offs just along the left hand side. I think they're really delicate and beautiful, and they just add a little something. Until I started getting the Love From Lizi kits, I hadn't actually used these peel-offs. So I used the purple glitter paper there to cover up the section where the two pieces of paper meet, and I'm just using my my eyelet setter here to add in a little eyelet to my tag. You don't have to do this, but I just think it added a little something. So I threaded through some string that I had in my stash and used some foam dots to add the tag. So I realised at this point I shouldn't have actually glued down the top part of my panel, but I was able to just sort of pick that up and then secure the ends of my string using a piece of washi tape and just press that all back down. So I'm definitely a fan of fixing mistakes on my card. I think you know, if it doesn't look right, or if you're not happy with it, you're just not finished. You know, keep working, keep going. You might not make what you thought you were going to make, but you'll make something, and chances are you'll end up liking it. If you're really struggling, then maybe take a break, maybe put it to one side and take a look at it the next day, and you might just realise that actually it's a lot better than you thought it was. So I used the Love and Wishes sentiment there just to finish off card 10, and it was at this point I realised I hadn't actually made a card using the washi tape, and it was such a shame because the washi tape is beautiful. It's sort of a yellow tape with like a white stitching detail. So I decided to go ahead and use some nested stars to cut out a star. I wanted there to be a star section and then a smaller star that fitted inside. So this is the real life speed that I apply washi tape. So no, of course it isn't. I've sped you up while I just applied some washi tape to the background, and then I added some foam tape to my glittery panel with my star, which is obviously cut perfectly in the centre because that's what I wanted. And then I'm laying in the smaller star. Now, my idea at this point was to have the washi tape design continue on the inside star. So I just laid that down, making sure that the small little stitching details lined up with the washi tape in the background, and then I went around the star and I trimmed it all. So I decided I didn't like that by the time I was finished, so you can completely ignore that step, but there we go. So again, I used some foam tape just to stick that in, and then I die cut a hello sentiment from, I believe this is a Simon Says stamp die. And I'm just using my finger, really fancy, to apply some multi-matte medium to the back, and that's cut once out of the glittery paper and once out of some purple foam to add some dimension. So I'm going to go ahead and press that down, and then I peeled up my card and I trimmed off the excess washi tape. If you're working with washi tape or anything that's sort of sticky, I would really recommend using non-stick scissors. So once I had all those edges cut, I just sort of ran the card along my table, which for me it sort of felt like I would help to stick down any of those loose edges, and then for that top and the bottom piece I just folded in the excess washi tape to make sure it would all stay. Okay, so that's where I decided to peel off the washi tape that was on the inside part of the card because I didn't like it, and then I'm using some glue dots to add some of the sequins. So that's it, that's the bonus card and the 10 cards all finished. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll quickly do you a run through to show you all of the cards that I made. If you're after more inspiration for the card kits, I'd highly recommend heading over to the Love From Lizi Facebook page, which I'll have linked below. And if you're interested in finding out how you can purchase or subscribe to these kits, or any of the other items that are available in the Love From Lizi shop, then head over to the Love From Lizi blog or the website, and again I'll have that linked below. So there are a few of these kits still available on the Love From Lizi website, so if you're really quick you might be able to get your paws on one. Unfortunately, these kits are each month, they're a one-off, so once they're gone and they're sold out, that's it. But some of the supplies are still available from the Love From Lizi site, so I'd highly recommend heading over and checking that out if you're interested. Okay, so thank you for joining me today. I'm really glad you stuck with me to the end of the video. Please let me know you enjoyed this video if you did by hitting like, subscribe, and leaving me a comment below. On screen right now are a couple more videos that I think you might enjoy. If you haven't already seen them, just go ahead and click on the thumbnail and that should take you straight through to the video. That's all from me for now. I'll see you again soon.